Alright, welcome back everybody. Today we have another repair project, which means this video might very well be called Welcome to Adulthood, because one thing you don't understand as a kid is that so much of being an adult is fixing your broken stuff. This time it's my living room chair, which the label on the bottom tells me is a Quincy model chair from World Market. The label also tells me the chair was made in 2013, which does not seem quite right to me because I don't believe we've had it that long. Nevertheless, that's what the label says. Now, I recently noticed a problem in the chair when I'd sit in it, which was that I'd have this sinking feeling on the middle left-hand side. Eventually, I turned the chair over and unzipped the dust cover on the bottom, and that made the problem pretty obvious, which was there was a broken spring that was actually poking down through the dust cover, and so the upper middle left-hand side was not actually getting any support. And as I said, I'm an adult who doesn't want to buy a new chair, so when this broke, it was my job to repair it. Now, fixing the spring truly was not actually all that difficult, though it did have some complications, kind of. But nevertheless, fixing the spring requires some disassembly of the chair first. That means I need to remove the back and the back legs, which were all a single piece, from the seat and the front legs, which were also a single piece. Now, these were bolted together, and you get to those bolts through the bottom of the chair, through that same dust cover. On both those it separates, and then from there we can begin to work on removing the upholstery on the seat portion, or removing some of the upholstery on the seat portion to allow access to the front and the back of the spring. Now, going into this, my hope was that I wouldn't have to remove much of the upholstery, that I might be able to just kind of remove the front and the back staples and kind of tuck it, those portions of the upholstery up and over to remove to give me access to the front and the back of the spring. This was sort of a misguided hope, but at the beginning we're all holding our fingers, or crossing our fingers that it's going to work out easily. Now, if you've ever done upholstery, you know that this uses a lot of staples, all of which I removed from this the hard way, prying them out with a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. The easy way, I suppose, would have been to just rip the upholstery off, and it doesn't matter if it gets ripped and staples be damned, but since I was trying to reuse the upholstery, it needed to be kept as intact as possible. And as it turns out, removing those staples was truly one by one was truly the most time-consuming part of this repair, especially because I was committed to not tearing the upholstery, which also meant if a staple wouldn't come out cleanly, or if some was left behind, I simply hammered it in. Now, I do have some previous upholstery experience, sort of, which is to say this wasn't my first upholstery project. Back in, I think, 2018 or 2019, I reupholstered a chair that had actually been in my room when I was a teenager and has been following me around for like the last 35 years. The chair originally had some awful green fabric on it that had become threadbare and so needed to be replaced, and it also had a broken arm. I removed all the upholstery, all the padding, all of that, and replaced it all, repaired the broken arm, and reupholstered it. The only part that I didn't do myself was to sew the new cover for the cushion. My mother-in-law actually did that to me. So that was the first project. I've also done some limited upholstery on the tops of footstools I've made in the past. Now this repair process actually only took about an hour, and the video, as you see it, is only sped up about 4 to 6 times, and most of that time actually went into removing the staples, which means the second hardest part actually was getting the old spring off and the new spring on. At one point in the video, you can kind of see me struggling to remove the brackets on the old spring and the nails from the brackets in order to put the new spring on. Eventually, in order to make my life easier on this, I just removed nearly all of the upholstery from the seat, just to give me much better access to that spring in that area. Now, the replacement spring was just a generic 20-inch spring that I bought in a four-pack off Amazon that came with 2 different types of brackets. Since I only used one of those springs, obviously if one of the other ones breaks, I definitely have extras to work with as needed. And you can see it around this point that I'm starting to expose the second bracket on the footstool, which again I basically ripped off with a hammer and pliers, mostly with pliers. And then to replace it, I used brackets that came with the springs and used nails that were entirely too long, but you know, it didn't matter. They went in just the same anyway and worked just fine. Probably the hardest part of this process actually was stretching the new spring across the seat and getting it hooked in the front, which kind of really had me fighting. And most of the fight is that I was trying to do this in kind of a dumb way. I was thinking I could put the bracket on the spring, stretch it out, and hammer a nail in and hold it in place. And it took me a while to kind of on the struggle bus, took me a while on the struggle bus to kind of figure out that's not the way this should be done, because I don't have 3 hands, one to hold the spring in place, one to hold the hammer, and one to hold the nail and the bracket in place. Eventually I figured out, which is why you see me working with a clamp to try to give me something that I could clamp it down with, but that was a failure. And eventually I figured out, hey, why don't you put a nail into the bracket, stretch the spring to the bracket, and then nail the bracket down for good. Eventually I figured that out, but it kind of took a little bit of time for me to conceptually understand that, which feels kind of embarrassing in a sense, but you know what, it's really good to put these out there to show that sometimes you struggle with the projects for really dumb reasons, and that they work out in the end, and you're more likely to remember that lesson you learned from it simply because you had to do a bunch of stupid stuff to get to the point where it worked. Now once the new spring was on, I just needed to reassemble the chair in reverse. First is folding the upholstery back on, pulling the sides tight, stapling that onto the bottom, starting in the middle and working outwards, then doing the sides. In the end, the finish, or the, I don't know what you call it, you know, in some places the fabric is not pulled as tight as it could be, and so you might get a little bit of a ripple there. But I'm not mad about it because it's just my regular cheapo chair. And when you watch me reassembling it, you can see that there are a ton of staples that go into this thing. And the reason a ton of staples go into this thing is they are the cheapest part of the process. So go ahead and drive in, you know, staple in as many as you want, um, because, you know, they cost you nothing. Funny is, at like 14:08 of this video, you can kind of see a brief interruption from a scam call, and I left that in the runtime just to show that this took about an hour, and that included me moving the camera around and me dealing with a scam phone call. And towards the end, you can see when I put the dust cover back on, the broken spring has cut through it. That's not an issue anymore, obviously, because this spring is not broke, but you can see where it is. As I said, it wasn't really a difficult fix in the grand scheme of things. And even if I had some struggles with it a little bit here and there, the real takeaway from this is that it's often easier to fix your stuff than you think it is, rather than replacing it. So, hey, quit throwing your stuff away when it breaks and see if you can fix it before you trash it. Uh, that's the lesson. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.